Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to the sanctuary. Today, we'll continue our journey through A&P. I'm your host, Professor C, and specifically we're going to talk about the next section of the integument, which I'm focusing on hair and nails. So, let's dive in. Okay, let's start off with some big hair picture here. Hair is protein, and they're protein filaments that grow from follicles that are inside the dermis. Remember, we talked about the dermis having accessory structures. One of those things is called hair, and they are epidermal in origin, but they push their way down into the dermis, and when they start growing, they will grow from follicles deep in the reticular region of the dermis. Functions: provide warmth, insulation. Yes, think about an insect crawling on your skin, like crawling across your arm. Yes, you have some skin receptors, like Meissner's corpuscles, that could detect that potentially, but if you have hair sticking out and the insect is making the hair move, this will cause increased sensation, so you can know if there's a bug crawling on you so you can get it off. Protect the scalp against not only sunlight damage, but mechanical damage, tearing, or ripping. Shield against sunlight. We'll talk about that more specifically in a little bit. And protecting the eyes, like with the eyebrows or eyelashes. So lots of functions of hair. This is a pretty cool image of a scanning electron microscope, very, very up close, a cross section, if you will. You can see the hair follicles here. And you can see the structures that they're embedded with. So a really good picture of the dermis. Looks like all the spongy stuff around it is the dermis, and the hair is seen in section. Alright, to get in close to a hair, if you could look at one specific hair, you would notice it's made of 3 layers, sometimes only 2. So the medulla is the center, the middle. Medulla always refers to the middle of something. And you only see this medulla in large, thick hairs. Sometimes in blonde hair, you hardly ever see it. It may not have a medulla at all at very fine blonde hair. We don't know of the function in humans, but in other mammals which bear hair, it adds to warming their body. The cortex is the meat of the hair, if you want to call it that. It's going to give the strength and the elasticity. The texture of your hair is determined by the cortical structure, and the color is also determined by the amount of melanin in the cortex. The cuticle is the outer part. It almost looks to me like roof tiles, right? Like shingles on a roof, how they overlap. And that should tell you something about what they're there for. So you have shingles on your house overlapped to control water content. And that's exactly what's going on with the cuticle. So the most superficial layer of a hair is the cuticle, with these overlapping scale-like keratinized cells. Prevent damage and control water content. Okay, getting to a little bit more detail of the dermal structures of a hair. The follicle is just a sheath of connective tissue that surrounds the root of a hair. So if I were to draw something like this, I would call this the root, and sometimes you hear that called the papilla, although there is some subtlety here, but I don't want to get too technical here. Now the bulb itself is going to be a little bit further out here like this. I would call this the bulb and this the root. Where this line is pointing for a hair bulb is pointing to a strange place, in my opinion. So a hair papilla, remember we know papilla just means a bump, or the root is a cone-like region within the bulb, which must be broader and larger, and contains blood vessels. You see this capillary, that would be the blood vessels supplying nutrients into the root. The shaft is the part of the follicle that exits the skin. That's the part you can see sticking out visibly. Alright, eyebrows. Notice they're on top of the eye and they're not on the bottom of the eye, something you may not have ever thought about why. But if you do think about it for a moment, it kind of gives you the function of eyebrows, right? So if you are going to sweat from your forehead, the sweat's trying to drop down because of gravity, and the eyebrows will protect it from perspiration getting in the eye. It also prevents precipitation, that would be rain, from getting into the eyes. So eyebrows prevent both perspiration and precipitation, sweat and rain, from getting into the eyes. That's why we don't see them underneath, because gravity only pulls one direction. You could also use eyebrows for communication, non-verbal communication is communication without using words. You can squint your eyebrows, you can raise one eyebrow, you can give all sorts of signals to people. The better they know you, the more signal you can give to them, right? Sometimes you can give somebody a look and you can just move your eyebrows in a certain direction and they can immediately tell that they probably should stop talking because you've given them that eyebrow look, right? So nonverbal communication, big part of eyebrows. Eyebrow follicles are not as active as, say, follicles on your scalp. For this reason, they fall out a lot more than the hair on your scalp. So only active for a few months before they are replaced. Hair shapes: straight hair, wavy hair, and curly hair, also known as kinky hair, depending on what part of the country you're from. And the only difference between natural straight, natural wavy, and natural curvy is the orientation of the roots in the dermis. So straight hair has symmetrical proteins, with the root and the shaft being perpendicular to the skin. So this first picture over here shows a root perpendicular, or shaft perpendicular to the skin surface. It shows a nice round symmetrical protein structure. This gives you straight hair. Wavy hair and kinkier or curlier hair to a further degree has asymmetrical protein structure. Not only that, but the root and the shaft are angled in the dermis in such a way that when it grows out, it's forced to curl up and therefore gets this curled or kinked look. And you can see the three shapes on top here. The way the proteins are arranged also determines if you have wavy or curly hair. Hair color. We're talking about natural color, I know, even though some of these may not be perfectly natural. So there's this compound called eumelanin, right? It's a type of melanin. There's not just a standard melanin. Eumelanin produces what we usually call your hair color. So browns, blacks, this is the most prevalent type of melanin and is the one that provides most to the coloration of the hair. But there is another type called pheomelanin, and it gives rise to red hairs, yellow hairs, blondes, and auburns. So your hair color is a combination of eumelanin and pheomelanin together. Gray or white hair is caused either by decreased melanin production as you get older, but it can also be caused by the presence of air bubbles or damage to the shaft. And just for fun, polar bears don't have white hair. They have transparent hair, kind of like a fiber optic cable. And they reflect the snow that's around them, and it gives them this white look, but they're actually brown underneath with transparent hair. Goosebumps. All right, this phenomenon where you get scared or cold and you get these little goosebumps is what they're called colloquially. There's many other names for them out there in the world. What these are caused from is a muscle called the erector pili. Just like the word erect, to build up, to make tall, erect is a very similar thing, and pili refers to hair. So we're talking about a muscle that erects or makes the hair stand up. And it says there, a smooth muscle attached to follicles at the hair bulge. In some images you'll see the hair bulge here, somewhere midway between the bulb and the shaft. And this erector pili muscle is usually a reddish or brownish, well, it looks like a strip of tissue there. And what it does is it contracts, like all muscles do. And when it contracts, it pulls the hair straighter and makes it stand up. Hair loss. Alopecia is a general term for the thinning of the hair, and this happens in both males and females after the age of 40 and continues the older you get. Alopecia areata is what you see right here, this hair loss in patches. It is normal, but it's a normal pattern of hair loss. It may not appear normal to you, and you may not like it, but it is quite common. If you look over here at this famous fella, we see that he has no hair on his scalp at all. But he does have eyebrows. Does have some facial hair. So this is probably alopecia totalis. Right? Let's pretend that it's not going to grow back. Total loss of hair on the scalp, alopecia totalis. If his eyebrows are gone too, and facial hair, we may suspect he has alopecia universalis, that is total hair loss over the entire body. And then when you hear about male pattern baldness, sometimes called true baldness or frank baldness, it is genetically determined by the X chromosome. So mamas give the genetic information to make their sons bald, not the fathers. That's a strange thing. If we ever do a genetics talk, I'll get into that in more detail. But it is X-linked trait, and it is often linked with testosterone levels as well. It's not just the genetics, but also hormonal levels influence whether a man will become truly and totally bald. Fingernails, toenails too for that matter. They're not claws. That's the first note that I would always give my students, is they're not like a cat's claws. They don't retract, they don't stick out, and they're not used for defense, right? At least is like if someone's attacking you, you say you claw them with your nails, but it doesn't do much except scratch the skin, right? It doesn't cause some major damage like an animal's claws can tear you open. So what is a fingernail? What is a toenail? Well, it's just as it says here, a scaly type of skin, a scaly type of epidermis found on the distal, that would be the end portion, right? Just the ends. Dorsal, just the back. It's not fully wrapped around the fingertip. Fingers and toes. So the fingers and toes on their distal dorsal surfaces will have this very hard, very scaly modification. And of course, it's about protection, protection, protection. Humans are tool users, and we use our hands to use the tools. And the idea is that if we don't protect our fingers, we could damage them more easily, and then we can't use tools and we can't contribute to society as we used to. So evolution would put some pressure on protecting the distal dorsal surfaces of the fingers and the toes. So we have this structure called a lunula, sometimes just called a lunule. This little white looks like a moon, right? Looks like a moon shape, and that's what lunule, like lunar, refers to as the moon. So the lunule is the free edge of the nail plate, and the nail plate is kind of this pinky part here, whitish pinkish stuff right there, the very hard keratinized epithelium that provides the protection. The lunule is just the free edge of the nail plate. The eponychium is this skin here at the base of the nail plate that thickens and allows it to set in place. And then on the sides of the nail, we have what's called the groove, the nail groove, where it pushes into the skin at the boundary of the nail plate and the skin. All right, that was a pretty quick one, but full of information. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, check out some more videos in my series. See ya for the next one. Bye-bye.